What's up, dude? You want to go outside? Yeah. So it's day 4 post-Hurricane Helene. We have the generator running, but in cycles. So we're just on and off to keep the freezers frozen and the fridges cool, but to not keep them going non-stop. And when they're on, we charge batteries. I will say at this point, we're finally hitting our stride and like getting everything in order. We've got the water figured out and the well. We've been playing musical generator. We actually had a friend that they have power back over in Lexington, and they loaned us an extra generator. So that is helping a lot. And it's a good thing because I think it's looking like we're probably going to be at least the end of the week, possibly a whole nother week before we do have our power restored. So last night when we had the generator on the well running, which we're essentially just running it long enough to fill everything up, we were able to get all the toilets filled last night and told the kids, hey, it's on right now, everybody use this. We filled all the animals' troughs up. And while it was on, I filled up multiple big pots of water and my kettle to make coffee because priorities, right? Alright, we're going to sit on my front porch and chat a bit, waiting for my coffee to get ready. It has been such I guess testing week, and I've been trying to gather my thoughts on it. I actually started to film a video night before last, and I recognized the fact that I was still I was still too shook up to let anything out because yeah, like I don't like saying things, especially things that could be viewed as intense or hard, until I've settled my own heart into being able to come from a place of peace and hope and love. And I definitely wasn't there the other day. We went yesterday. I took my boys and we went over to our friends Jesse and Chastity's because they have power back. And we were able to go over there and take like hot showers, which made a massive difference just in overall how I felt about the situation. And then Maya getting the well pump working periodically, and we're not going to keep it on. That also really lightened the load because otherwise we're having to haul water. I think that this event, Hurricane Helene, is going to end up being a historic event just because of the great destruction that it's brought in the entire path, but specifically in North Carolina through all of the flooding. Like a lot of whole towns are washed away, and of course we have a lot of friends in this area. One of the things that is happening here in my region in the Midlands of South Carolina is that the floodwaters are making their way down from North Carolina, and as of last night there was talk that they may start evacuating parts of Columbia because of the potential flooding. The Congaree is like, the banks have just swollen drastically over the last 24 hours as all those floodwaters come down. So I feel like we're not even really fully out of it yet. And then there's the fact that like our whole community is completely wrecked for this very wide swath. Like I know in Augusta, Georgia, which is 50 miles away from here, they're also wrecked. So when you have like that many people in the same state of need, it can create a certain measure of issue just because there's supply issues, because everybody needs the same stuff. And you know, I grew up in Tornado Alley in Arkansas, and so I've been involved in multiple storms, or at least had multiple storms affect my community or friends that live nearby. But the thing with tornadoes is it's typically a little more isolated. There may be a path, but it's not as wide. And so typically when that happens, you've got a bunch of people coming together to help those who are affected. And that is happening a lot here. But there's just so many more people affected. And like with North Carolina being in such a state of just complete despair, here mostly everybody is well and they have at least somewhat access to basic needs, even if they don't have power or water in their homes. So we're just nowhere near the top of the priority list, which for that I'm thankful. You know, I mean, going another week without power is not gonna be it's not a walk in the park, but compared to your entire house getting wiped off its foundation, like, obviously we definitely have the easier road of what people are dealing with. One of the things that I put on my list of like things to get to be more prepared was a hand crank coffee grinder. Not necessarily the top of the priority list, but we're probably never going to keep ground coffee in our house. I was thinking I may freeze dry some like made coffee they could just add water to. Right now we've been using the battery bank to grind our coffee. So I've made some observations through this process. As I said, I've been making a list.
Checking it twice.
Checking it twice, yeah. Hold on. Maya, what do you feel like is like the big hole or a big hole in our planning? Like something that you want to address moving forward for preparedness sake?
Emergency power probably would be the biggest thing I'm gonna shore up.
Yeah.
At minimum, a solar system and inverter for the well house that will just keep the pump on without having to use gasoline.
Yeah.
Long term, obviously, would be solar for the barn and the house. I'm looking into a possible whole house generator that runs off propane. They're very efficient. I mean, it's not like a super long term, but I mean, it can go for a very long time.
Yeah.
Just some things like that.
I've been thinking a lot about different things that you can do and have, essentially like skills that you can have and tools you can have to need less of those things. Like I would really like to have a more efficient way to wash laundry without having, you know, the ability to use our washing machine, like just some sort of like hand washing system. And you know, you can always like put a tub together, but like if I had like a wringer or something like that, like I could pretty simply wash clothes, and we have the clothesline already up. And then I really think that we should build an outhouse, like just to have something like that, like a privy, old school style, because we're on the septic system that has a pump, and so, you know, it's limited without power. We had planned on doing a lot of these things, but we were going to build our house, so we were always like, well, once we build the house, we'll set these systems up. While I do think that it's wise to like consider your 5-year plan so that you're not like undoing what you did a few years before, I think now, I mean, now we've decided to stay in this house, so that's kind of a moot point, but I do think it's really easy to put off preparedness for years down the road, being like, well, once that happens, I'll get prepared, and then maybe not do what you can where you are now. At least that's kind of what we're realizing we did. Alright, we're gonna wait for the coffee to finish. I do love my coffee in the morning. I'm appreciating it even more in these circumstances. The reason why I got so tangled up the other day, and I really had to process it, I took the kids out and we went out to some stores to get some paper plates and paper towels and stuff like that we don't typically use. Our community is really pulling together. Like yesterday, several of the local businesses had, they pulled out their big like commercial size grills and basically provided a place for people whose freezers are thawing and they're like on the brink of potentially losing their food. Like a lot of people are losing their food, but they were making an opportunity for people to bring their thawing food and have it just all cooked to, at the very least, share with the community, you know, like for people to be able to come get a meal. which I thought that was so incredible. Like, watching the community come together has been awesome. So, but I also witnessed just a ghastly amount of people who are understandably very frustrated, feeling very hopeless, probably very overwhelmed with how they felt, but who were just losing it because of the inconvenience that they were facing. So, like, Walmart here was without power for, I don't know, a couple of days, and so when they opened back up, they had to clean out their entire cooler and freezers and just throw everything away because it couldn't be sold, it had spoiled, or at least had thawed enough that it would spoil. So they were kind of restocking some areas, but they had it roped off. And I was there, and there were people, like many, like lined up at the like little roped off areas, and like yelling at the workers and turning around and just being, this is ridiculous, and they're like so mad that they can't go get what they want. I saw instances like that throughout the day, as well as like our local Facebook pages, and basically the local police had to make a statement saying stop calling 911 because your power and water is out, we're aware, like, because people are feeling emergency. Now there are cases where people do need to call in if they're in the emergency, you know, if they're on oxygen or something like that, but they were getting so inundated with just all the people messaging and calling that their power was out and wanting emergency responders to come help get it back on. I have my coffee now. Look at this beautiful view. Foggy morning on the farm. We're not going to start trying to cut up our down trees until after we have power back. We got like the immediate stuff handled, like where the trees were down on the zip line and stuff that like could have posed a risk, but it's all secure right now. It'll just be a lot easier to clean things up when we have power and water. So we're just waiting and mostly just putting our energy into caring for the farm, keeping our freezers cool. You know, we're hand milking because our machine runs on power, and that's kind of taking a lot of our capacity right now. I keep filming and then deleting. I feel like I'm really bad about qualifying what I'm trying to say, and oh, I know this and I know that. It's because I've been in the public eye long enough to have been in the receiving end of people's judgment, accusation. So I'm just going to lay it all down. I'm just going to put it all out. You need to be concerning yourself with your family's needs. I went up to Vermont, to New England, New Hampshire, 2 weeks ago, and I did a talk at the Homesteaders of New England about resilience. And it was an intense talk. Probably one of the more intense talks I've ever given. And it was very uncomfortable to give, because when you're making everybody feel good and you're inspiring everybody, it's awesome. They're cheering, it's great. But whenever you're bringing out really intense truths, it doesn't feel as good. But the feedback that I got from that talk was probably more meaningful than any other talk I've ever given. We've been thinking a lot about resilience this summer. It has come back to the forefront of my mind. And I think a lot of times that is just the case of being led, of, you know, turning the noise off and being able to kind of sit with that still small voice and pay attention to what you're feeling nudged to do. And, you know, we just made the really difficult decision to massively downsize our farm back to our basic needs, rather than focusing on trying to provide a lot for other people. Right now, we're dealing with just immense gratitude that we did that, because what we're dealing with now, as far as making sure everything has water, and we're hand milking because, you know, obviously the milk machine doesn't work, and we're providing our families water and food, and in the middle of all of this, we're sitting here going, how much harder would this have been had we not just gotten rid of 16 head of cattle? How much harder would this have been if we still had multiple cows in milk that we were now having to hand milk? And keep in mind, our cows were bred for being used with milk machines. Their teats are tiny. They're not easy to hand milk. And we're just sitting here thinking, wow, I'm so glad that we followed that nudge. And then I deal with this hesitance to speak openly of like, hey, you should be concerned about your family's needs. When I go out in public and I see all of these people freaking out, or these people posting on the Facebook groups, and honestly, the thing that they're saying unanimously, maybe in not so many words, is, hey, I have a massive need and nobody's meeting it. And in a society, there are always going to be people who are weak. And there is always the case that you could have done all the preparation in the world, but if your house gets flooded off its foundation, you are immediately put in the situation of being at the mercy of other people helping you. Like, that's always going to be reality. That is part of being human. Like, you could in a moment be completely debased down to nothing. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to not be in that position. And the thing that I've really been thinking about with all this resilience talk, with all that we've been looking at for the last few months, for the fact that I was speaking to this directly 2 weeks ago, and now I'm in the middle of having to test my own resilience and looking at our own systems and thinking, what could we do different? It's going to require prioritizing some things. It's going to require potentially some sacrifice and discomfort to say, okay, this is what we're doing now, instead of some other things that we wanted to do. But I'm seeing our fragility and I want to address it. And I know that it can be really overwhelming when you're like, oh my gosh, there are so many things that, I live in town, I'm on city water, I don't know what I would do for food, I don't know what I would do for power, and I don't have thousands of dollars to go spend on all these kinds of things. I get it. Like, I totally get that. What can you do? This is the same stance as I always say, turn your waiting room into a classroom. Just because you can't do everything, it doesn't mean you should do nothing. Just because it's not ideal doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen at all. We're acknowledging in ourselves, you know what, we were waiting for a more ideal situation, and now we're caught in the inconvenience of not being prepared. So we're going to make some adjustments. The talk I gave in New England, I talked about resilience as pieces of paper. If I hold up one sheet of paper and I say punch through this, you could easily put your hand right through it. If I hold up 10, it would be a little harder. 20 would be more resistance. If I hold up an entire ream of paper and I say punch this, you would hesitate because your hand is not going to get through that. You're probably going to hurt your hand. And I view resilience like that. It's each skill you have, each tool you have, each system you put in place, each resource that you put in place is another sheet of paper on the stack. Just because you can't go out and immediately have a whole ream of paper doesn't mean you shouldn't start collecting them. It doesn't mean you shouldn't start thinking about, well, what could I do? I'm sitting here thinking, man, if I had a way to wash laundry by hand, that would alleviate some of the pressure that we're feeling. I'm looking at the areas, where's the low-hanging fruit? Where could I add some paper without spending thousands of dollars? We can talk about a whole house generator, and that's really awesome, but it's not going to be an immediate thing because it's expensive. But what could I do in the meantime leading up to that to just add more sheets of paper to the stack? I just finished rereading a book that I've read before called The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. And it's historical fiction, but she really does her research and reads lots of memoirs and does tons of, she puts the work in to write really solid historical fiction. I feel like I learned something from all of her books, but this particular story is set in the Dust Bowl. And it's a hard read. But I've always had this real fascination with the world wars, with the Depression. My grandfather, my pappy, was a boy through the Depression, so I remember hearing stories about how his family grew food and really thrived. The talk that I gave in New England talked about resilience, but the title of the talk was A Life Not Easily Shaken. And right now, in the middle of all of this, even seeing the holes in preparation, even feeling vastly thankful for what I'm able to do, what I want to secure even more is a life not easily shaken. And what I want to encourage other people to do is the same. Anywhere you can shore up your life and take responsibility for the basic human needs of your family, do that. There's craziness going on in the world, but also people have never been as fragile as they are. They've never been as disconnected from their basic humanity as they are now. generations have been kind of lulled to sleep at this point and don't even really realize what their basic human needs are. From this place of being in the thick of it, before it wore off, I didn't want to wait a week or two to say it. I didn't want to wait until I wasn't in the place of actual need. Think about these things. We need to think about these things. The truth is, those people who are yelling at the employees at Walmart, they're just scared. I'm not saying this from a place of condemnation, but I am saying, hey, let's be aware that we can be proactive and try to avoid being in that position as much as possible. We started to feel really strongly to like be prepared. It's been like over 10 years now. And the place we are today is a mixture of a lot of really hard work and the unending grace of God. You know, in the middle of this event, I'm seeing the fact that when your basic human needs are in question, whether those are going to be met, like, people are not worried about election division. People are not worried about all the things we worry about on a regular basis. Literally, all the stuff we busy ourselves with on a regular basis literally falls to the wayside when basic human needs might not get met. And I'm just seeing how fragile our society is because we are so accustomed to our basic human needs being met as a given that we put all of our energy, all of our resources, and all of our focus into the peripheral things that are literally gone in an instant the minute that those basic human needs aren't met. So I just wanted to say from the middle of it, like, hey, think about those things. Just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. Just because you can't move to the country and dig a well and put everything on solar or whatever, like, doesn't mean that you should not have some measure of preparedness in place. Whatever capacity is within your means to do it. I'm viewing this event for us, I know it's not this way for everybody, but for us, as a merciful and beautiful opportunity to test the things that we're building. I don't want to view this as, oh, this is the event that I have to get through. I want to use this as an opportunity to strengthen the foundation, that if something were to happen again, if there's some other breakdown, that I have not hinged the foundational needs of my family as humans on a system that's just very broken. I hope this is clear. I feel like I've danced around so much because I don't want to be insensitive and I don't want to be difficult, but that's our batteries. It's time to charge them. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today and all the days you do. I bless you. Until next time.